All right. Good morning on this rainy Sunday as I adjust the camera because YouTube Live, you don't get previews here to make sure it all looks nice. Let me know if you can hear me. Great to see everybody out there. All righty. Get this one. Oh, interesting. Anyway, it's live, folks. So when there's no telling what's going to happen. There we go. Okay. This gets better and better. This was working fine just a second ago. Anyway, it is a rainy Sunday as we get everything going here. The date is July 13th, 2025. Grab a cup of coffee, listen to the rain outside. It is a proper rainy Sunday out here, guys. It is raining. As a kid, I would get a stack of comic books because I could not go outside if it was raining too bad. And with those comic books, I would jump on the top bunk of my bed. I would be extremely close to the roof of that trailer we lived in as a kid when I was a kid and stuff, and I could hear the rain as I read comic books and stuff, right? And that's the feel. That's one of the things. That's the feel. As a kid, the comic books are there. You can remember how they smell. The stepdad had some older Charlton comic books there that smelled different than the 1973 Marvel comics and stuff I read as a kid. Things like that. And they bring back like good memories, and it's a good way to spend an afternoon. You stay out of trouble. Good morning, John. Now, everybody that's popped in here, now that we are all situated, make sure you're just like John, man. John is subscribed. He thumbs it up. He hits the bell for when you know I do this. I am back to shooting videos. So make sure you hit the bell to do that. I do sporadic live shows and try to stay consistent on the Sunday for all you new guys that are in here. So make sure that you pop in there. Now, a few topics that we're going to talk about today is that it's going to be filled, and some of the things I talk about, I will probably break down in other videos when we come down. But it's kind of wild because I'm processing a few things. I'm still processing. Still have a lot to read. Still have a lot of stuff going on. There's been a lot of things going on. Comic collector, great to see you guys. Let me know that you're out there. All right. But there's been a lot to process this show, as you can see from the title. We're going to talk about the James Gunn Superman movie a little bit, right? I saw it yesterday with the wife. She loved it. I loved it. It's not woke, but we'll get there, right? With what's out there. Not that I'm really worried about some of those things too much anymore. And then we had Jim Shooter pass away, editor in chief, Wonder Kid of comics, editor in chief of Marvel during their what I consider their greatest era. Um, and then built upon Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. I have to give Stan Lee things like that. But to me it was their greatest era. Started comic books when he was 14. Did 50 comic books while he was in high school. Things like that. There's been a lot to process, and we've had I've done many tribute shows before when we've lost comic book creators, people I grew up with, George Perez, Keith Giffen, Bernie Wrightston, years ago and stuff. But there's something about old Jim that I'm still processing here. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll show some of his works that I enjoy. And of course, you have comic books. And then, depending on how things go, I have what I've read, what I'm reading. Two things that were just written horribly, I think, that I can show. And then two or three things that I'm like, these are wonderful. So it's a pretty balanced show today. Right. So make sure you comment. Let me know you're there. Ask your questions and stuff and get ready. All right. So before we get to the Superman spoiler stuff, we'll give people time to get in here and to realize that it is going to be spoilery. So I kind of want to set that off to the end so they can decide. Let's talk about Jim Shooter for a minute. Right. Josh, my friend, if you guys, he's done 2 3 of these live shows with me. He's he's got a job to where he's going to have more time to be streaming, right? So my whole point of bringing that up is that when it comes to Jim Shooter and things like that, I probably like to do a show with a few other people and stuff to talk about, right? But Jim Shooter, I got a few little notes here. 1951, sadly, to June 30th of 2025. So it's been less than 2 weeks since he passed away, right? a writer, editor, publisher in the comic book industry, right? 1965, 14-year-old Jim Shooter decides he needs to help his family. The way I've always heard the story and probably read a few things over the years, the family, a little hardship going on there in the home, and he's like, I got to start make a living, kind of contribute, and he starts taking line at notebook paper and he's drawing out and doing all these things, and he's making a comic book and he's sending it in to Legion, and they're getting published, not just published, but being drawn by like one of their superstar artists before comic books would really let there be superstar artists, if you will. People, the likes of Kurt Swan, and he's writing Superboy, and got to dabble in a little bit of Superman when he did the adult Legion stories and stuff when he was older and stuff. And that's amazing. And through high school, like I said, I'm pretty sure he did about 50 comics. Okay. And then the day came where they would call the home, and it's like, okay, we got some other stuff going on. We'd like to meet you. And now it's like he's busted, right? The editor has called the home, wants him to, what was it, Pittsburgh or something? Called the home, and they want him to come to the office, and they start putting two together, and the guy's like, hey kid, how old are you? Yeah, Pittsburgh. And he goes, put your mom on the phone. So he gets molded and shaped, and they have things going on where they kind of teach him how stories need to make sense and everything. And then I'm pretty sure when he graduated, he had several other jobs. He didn't really continue with comics there for a little bit. God, I'm trying to think what it was. But anyway, like I said, we'll go on. I'll do a video proper, another live stream and stuff, where I'll have my thoughts together. But anyway, he ends up coming back to Marvel for a little bit. Goes to and when he gets to Marvel, just to skip ahead a little bit, DC was the job, and they wore ties and stuff. When you showed up for work there, you were in a button-up shirt and a tie, right? If not an all-out suit and everything. He gets to Marvel, and I heard that, I didn't really specifically know who it was, but I kind of, over the years, I've heard it was like Len Wein or something like that. But when we get to the offices of Marvel, there's a bunch of young hippie guys closer to his age kind of hanging out, and they're sleeping under the desks and stuff. And they're like, hey, what's up? And he's like, oh, I'm home. And he ends up rising to the ranks there. As he rises to the ranks up in Marvel, he ends up getting handed off. Apparently, editorial was a mess. One of my favorite time eras of reading Marvel comics is that Bronze Age. What is going on? Apparently, I said something that desecrated Marvel there. So I don't know what's up with this. Try that. Now, we shall overcome these. It's not a Howler Mouse video or live show until something goes wrong, and we just had it happen. So anyway, editorial apparently was supposedly a mess, man. They had co-editors, Roy Thomas, Archie Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, I think. They were like co-editors. Jim Starlin actually drew them as clowns in one of his Adam Warlock stories, things like that. Archie Goodwin kind of took over. And I'm trying to think, I think he was 28. Is that right? 26 to 28 years old when he ended up becoming editor-in-chief. And I think this was 79. Feel free to correct me and stuff, right? And many things happened there to where you talk about the timing. But one of the things that he did is that comics were notoriously published late. You can actually look back at those Marvel comics and stuff, and they'll be like coming out August 28th or around about. They would sort of give you a ish at the end of those dates sometimes and stuff, right? He actually got with the printing presses and stuff, and he got with his staff and everything, and apparently it was a chore, and he got informed that they've always been late, and we always sort of done these things, but he got comics to start coming out on time. And then you have the creator side of it, right? This is a guy that started out at 14 years old with lined paper, drawing and scripting his own books. So he knew the process. This is a guy that came from the bottom up, and apparently it felt like he did it all. It's sort of what it feels like. And one of the things he did is he was sort of, well, if we're going to have these artists drawing for us and have them giving us our artwork and things like that, And he starts giving them supplies, is what I was told. And then there's the whole thing where there's some infamous interview. I don't know if it was around 82, 83, or something like that. And they were like, how much, tell us, how much do these artists make doing comics? How much do they do this and stuff, right? And he was one of the guys that started the royalty program and stuff, right, with creators. And that's the business side of it. A lot of stuff happened all the way up to when he brought out the new universe, and he actually wanted to. They ended up using his idea with the Ultimate line of comics, is what happened. But he wanted to just kind of reboot the Marvel universe for new readers and stuff because it had been 25 years, right? Instead, they ended up doing the new universe, and due to politics and business behind the scenes, he got the funding pulled out from him or decreased and stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, it felt like there was like a lot of things going self-sabotaged and things, right? So there's been all sorts of stories about this controversial figure about what he was trying to do and the people he made mad. Now, on the creator's side of it, um, I've been seeing many people talk about Jim on X and a little bit of Instagram, but the one that really gets me is Dennis Cohen. Dennis Cohen, love his stuff, man. I think I want to say his most popular work may be with Denny O'Neil on The Question in the late '80s. To me, it was his stuff in Milestone and Deathlock and stuff, right? If you like Bill Sienkiewicz work, I would put him in that in that style. All right. By no means is he a Bill Sienkiewicz clone, but he is awesome, right? I love his stuff. It's very expressive and it gets a reaction out of you and stuff, right? Founder of Milestone, but he put up a Twitter where he told the story of how I don't even think he was 20 yet, and he was in the offices of Marvel breaking into comics, first thing that he can do around 18. And Jim Shooter comes down the hall and he's like, Dennis, walk with me. I'm picturing this, right? Walk with me. So they go down to the streets of New York and they're walking down there. He's probably getting a hot dog or something. And he's like, Dennis, and this is Dennis Cohen's story, and he says, Dennis, I want to put you on Power Man and Iron Fist. I hear you know a little bit about martial arts, and you definitely know what it's like what it's all about being black. I'm going to expect you to do a good job and get things in on time, right? So he broke this guy in, and then he put in that he ended up like redrawing tons of his pages and stuff, right? Al Milgrom, of all people, who apparently was editor of Power Man and Iron Fist at the time, left a comment. I'm hoping this is either X or Facebook, but he gets, and this is recent, and Al Milgrom was like, "Oh, I don't remember making you redraw pages. That was probably Jim." Laugh, laugh, laugh. And I'm just sitting here like, that's amazing, because what I think Jim was really doing over the years is what a lot of things that I think people have gotten mad at him over is that he was not only trying to make the comics better, but he was molding and shaping these guys to bring out their best work. During Shooter's era run, we had the famous legendary Frank. I feel like I'm hyping it up, but it's over 45 years later and we're still talking about it, that when it started, you know what I'm saying? But we had the introduction of Elektra, Frank Miller's Daredevil. Frank Miller was penciler. Who was it? David McKenzie or somebody was writing it. Frank Miller ends up taking over the writing, brings in Elektra, puts religion and sex into Daredevil and molds the story and brings ninjas. Became a staple, a trope. People say trope, I say staple a lot of times, and we get ninjas and the clan and all that stuff, which lead to the turtles and everything, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and everything like that. Even the Tick fought ninjas. We got the Master on the TV show, right? But anyway, so Elektra becomes like hugely popular, and all of a sudden Frank Miller looks at Jim Shooter and says, I have to kill her. And Jim Shooter, this is what I'm saying, I didn't work for the guy, but all these stories I hear made it to where we have a lot of our great stories if you're into this hobby. And Jim Shooter, instead of saying absolutely no, since he's the boss and they're making money with it, he says, tell me the story. And that apparently one of the things I've heard from 2 or 3 other creators over the years in interviews and social media is this moment right here, like with Frank, where if you're going to do something, Jim Shooter wants to hear the story. And if the story's good, it makes sense, it's going to happen. Thus, Elektra was allowed to die. Yes, she's been resurrected over the years and things like that, but nobody knew that was coming. Okay. Death still meant something back then. Okay. In comic books, right? Okay. So, yeah. So he goes up, he does the universe, loses his job. John Byrne, some other creators come back. A lot of people have spoken out against him. Uh, I didn't work for the guy. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, he starts Valiant, and he starts licensing, building up this company, licensing the WWE, WWF at the time, Nintendo. He brings out Super Mario, Link, and stuff, and then all of a sudden they get the Gold Key Magnus, the robot fighter, and Solar. Eventually, we get to Rock, and he starts building this universe. And the template for that was the universe, where it really was the world outside your window. The Valiant universe takes place, in the real world. And man, collector wise, it was on fire. Low print runs, right? He did things to where, I don't know, I think it was like around the fourth issue of a lot of books, you would have the introduction of new characters that would lead to their book. And then he built this fantastic world, with the help of other people. Don't get me wrong, but he was steering the ship and writing most of the books. And we come to Unity, and man, it was on fire collector wise and stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, the Claim comes in, buys the place, and they underhandedly screw Jim over, and he's booted out. And he starts Defiant Comics, and he gets Defiant in there. And we have Warriors of Plasm, a lot of underrated books that you probably have never heard of if you weren't there. And I've got one to show, War Dancer, The Good Guys, where he did this contest to where it was a bunch of kids that had powers. And he ran a contest to where you could have been one of the kids that became one of the heroes. There's pictures in the back of like Good Guys #1 showing all the kids that won this contest, and they are the actual characters in the book, things like that, right? And then, that was starting to get off the ground, and he had Steve Ditko and Barry Windsor Smith with him, and came up with the idea of a bunch of cards as a zero issue trading cards you collect, things like that, right? And then Marvel was like, hey, we're going to make this character Plasmer, and you have Plasm, which he changed to Warriors of Plasm, and they sued him, saying that he stole the idea of their character, trademark, copyright thing, whatever, right? Derivative thing, right? And then all of a sudden, Defiant Comics wins in court, but they used up all their funds winning that and had to shut it down. And you've never heard Plasmer again from that Marvel comic. So the love he did Broadway Studios, and then there's other things he did. And he's always like going to be brought back, by other companies, and he would kick out. He came back to the Legion, and then that ending up with his run where he took his name off the book by the time it was over with. Things like that. He's always been a controversial figure. But the thing about it is that I feel like because of him, we got a quality of comics. We got a lot of people like Dennis Cohen and Frank Miller. And then I'm even going to say John Byrne got to do his, great run on Fantastic Four and things like that. We got a lot of great stuff, which caused other people to rise up and say, "What can we do?" And that made DC Comics sort of like Jeanette Kahn at DC Comics, who was running it, sort of like, these are artists, let them create. And we got Ronin, they got Frank Miller, and we got Ronin, which led to Dark Knight Returns and things like that. So to me, it's like, John, only did Jim Shooter make comics better, in my opinion. I heard there's like a lot of restrictions, though. I don't want to put him on a pedestal, but I'm just wanting to give him his due. But he was the catalyst that caused them to really want to elevate and do more mature storylines that made sense and have other influence and stuff, right? So yeah, I do remember reading an editorial in one of the comics, or they had in the middle of their Marvel comics, and I'm gonna have to look it up, but I remember it had a line where Jim Shooter was like, "This is not Burger King. We don't do comics your way." He started restricting how many panels should have been on in a comic book. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to say. The man was not perfect, but he definitely, to me, he was the catalyst of better things than whatever the people were at odds with him about. Okay, Valiant comics are fun to read, especially Bloodshot and Exo Man of War. Absolutely. Who is that? Goo, G-U-U. Camera, it's way over there, man. I'm trying to read this from way over there. I think I read a scan of the first issue of War Dancer. I've got a box over here with all that stuff. I don't know. I probably have a video up where I did a live show during the days of COVID where I definitely showed you all the Valiant books that I had. I wonder if I did one on Defiant. I'm sure I did. I think I needed to read scan the first issue of War Dancer. I liked the War Dancer. They just didn't get to finish what they were doing with most of those books. I just read the Shooter Return to Legion last night. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny that when Jim Shooter came on to Legion in the mid 2000s, back to it. That was an event for me, old Legion fans. But we had the three boot where Mark Waid came in and poor Barry Kitson. Barry Kitson was the artist. He did some great redesigns. Most of them I kind of like, some of them whatever. But it was the three boot was horrible. I thought it was absolutely horrible. And then what I liked is when Jim Shooter they even ended up making it Supergirl in the Legion of Superheroes. They messed it up. It was so bad, right? They brought in Supergirl trying to, save the book and stuff, right? It's definitely one of Mark Waid's failures, in my opinion, amongst his many, many, many wins. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, all of a sudden Jim Shooter comes on, and I loved how Jim Shooter just slowly, and when I say slowly, I'm talking like maybe over 2 or 3 issues. I'll have to get it out and look at it. But he just started writing them as the Legion of Superheroes proper, the one that ended with during the 80s with their Baxter series before they jumped ahead 5 years. He just started writing them like the Legion. Screw all that stuff in the world and all the stuff that happened before his run. You know what I mean? So it was fantastic. And I mean, I was like, this is the Legion. Even the costumes started changing back to normal with what they were having. But yeah, the three boot is definitely the Legion one that's the one where I'm like, just kind of ignore this, So okay, so some of his books we've been talking about the Legion, right? Before we get to the Superman talk, right? All right, so it's real easy. This is my beat up copy, but this is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, right? He brought in concepts like the Adult Legion. He did an issue where we got Nemesis Kid, Karate Kid, Princess Projecta, Pharaoh Lad. And back in like 2013 or 14, I have a video where it was the real first black superhero, Pharaoh Lad, who's not on here. Pharaoh Lad ended up dying, battling a Sun Eater. But supposedly, if I remember right, I got to go back and watch the video. I was much more astute with the history of that. But Pharaoh Lad wore a mask, like the man behind the iron mask. He was covered from head to toe. He kind of turned to metal. And I think he actually handed Superboy, you know, he sparred with him and beat him and stuff, right? And the whole trick is that the big reveal was supposed to be that you find out he's a black man. This is in the 60s, right? So that never happened, but that's what I'm trying to say. He was still innovative and young and willing to take chances and stuff. But this is what I'm talking about. This is some of the stuff that we got as he came in there, right? Used Mordru, right? And it's just solid storytelling, right? It is still simplistic Silver Age stuff. You know what I mean? It is still DC in the 60s, but going into the 70s. But you can definitely see he's getting better at his craft and with his ideas and expressing his ideas, and they were fresh and new. So yeah, as a Legion fan, Jim Shooter is right there. You know what I mean? Paul Levitz, Keith Giffen, and Jim Shooter all in the mix there. With people that came up. Probably the first time I read something where I saw the name Jim Shooter was when the stepdad acquired this right off the magazine rack and stuff, right? The Superman, Spider-Man proper team up, right? The second time they teamed up, but this one was full of action. And he's involved in the writing and the plot and everything like that. And that's one of the controversies I'm about to bring up with what came later, right? But he came in here, and as a kid, they had Dr. Doom. Okay, this was still the time. I'm like 8 years old reading this or something. And I've already known that Dr. Doom, this was a time where Dr. Doom was still the badass of the Marvel Universe, right? It's like you had Galactus. If he showed up, everybody went to shit. But with the heroes, it's when Dr. Doom showed up, they were like, oh no, because they knew they were in for a day, right? And I always wondered why he used the Parasite as the DC villain to do this, right? To me, in my mind, it should have been Lex Luthor or Brainiac. You know, I was already well versed in Superman, even as a child and stuff, right? And he used the Parasite. Turns out the Parasite is a creation of Jim Shooter's. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so this thing was fantastic. The story actually works with the Marvel and DC universe already kind of coexisting together and stuff. The introductions, the way it's broke down, you get little things that you wanted to see or didn't even know you wanted to see. You had the Hulk, Superman versus the Hulk, Spider Man versus Wonder Woman. They threw in some things in there, and it was very cool. You know what I mean? Even the way that Superman shows up at Doom's house, diplomatic immunity and stuff. You get what I'm saying? And how Doctor Doom takes him down, and how Spider-Man ends up having to save Superman so he can save them all. Things like that. It was just fantastic. Now, some of the controversies that came up is, they were talking about crossovers that was coming up, and then there's the infamous, God, who was writing it? Jerry Conway? I feel like Roy Thomas was involved somehow. But anyway, was the coming of the Justice League. We got X-Men and Teen Titans, which was a fantastic crossover. It was a one shot, and there was supposed to be a second one. I found an editorial where Marv, we got Chris Claremont, Walt Simonson, Terry Austin doing the X-Men versus Titans. Well, there's supposed to be a second one where I think it was supposed to be Marv, and there's an editorial in one of the Teen Titans or letters columns where Marv is saying George has already started on the second one. So, but we never came to fruition. But then we also had the JLA versus Avengers that was supposed to come out. George Perez already had pages going on, and supposedly Jim Shooter did not like the story, and he kept saying, "Hey, we need to revise the story. Send me pages." And I saw this interview or article where somebody was talking about it, showing shots and stuff, where Jim Shooter got blamed, and then people were saying, "Hey, Jim Shooter is reaching out," and they actually showed some of the letters and memos or whatever going back and forth, saying, "You guys have never gotten back to me. Where's the new plot? We got to make this better. Let's do this." So it was like scrapped. You know what I mean? And I think that was maybe the beginning of the end for Jim there, for demanding a little bit of quality there, I think, or whatever. That's how it comes off. All right. So what we got here? Hey, the comic collector. They mysteriously got new costumes they didn't order and just went with it. It was great. El Santo loved Legion of Superheroes. I do too, man. I got tons of it around here. Um, with my money in 1979, Superboy and the Legion was the first comic book I bought with my money. I still have it. Let me see. El Santo, Doctor Doom, and the Parasite were the villains. Yep. Good morning, Victor Shade. El Santo, the Hulk and Wonder Woman also appeared. Yeah, I covered that. Um, Good morning, Prime One Collector. Top of the morning, Howler. Great to see you. Top of the morning to you also. And Marv Wolfman was an amazing writer. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I got to meet him and get some stuff signed and talk to him a little bit. Funnily, we didn't really talk about DC Comics. It was kind of wild when I met him. We talked about Eclipse. So, where was I with Jim Shooter? So, some of the things I already showed that. Another thing that I want to point out, I don't know if I have two issues here or not. So I just kind of grabbed some of this stuff, guys, before I did this morning. Uh, Good to see everybody. Is that Jim Shooter, to me, wrote the best Doctor Doom, right? A lot of people don't really do that. That's the thing while I'm processing the thing about Jim Shooter doing. Some of the just by reading the stuff, some of the stuff that grabbed me in lesser known books and not really key books and things like that grabbed me because it was great storytelling and the characterization that he wrote the best Doctor Doom. Secret Wars that he wrote, the 12 issue maxi series that was really to push a toy line. He ended up, it was secretly, by the time you get to issue, I think issue 9, but definitely by the time you get to issue 10 and then 10, 11, 12, it was secretly a Doctor Doom story. Right, it was a Doctor Doom story. So those are some of the best moments of Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom fighting the Beyonder, finding resources on a patchwork planet out in the middle of nowhere, surviving, thriving, and then he ends up metaphorically fighting the Beyonder, where you have Doctor Doom versus God. that's heavy stuff. You know what I mean? So, but even before that, in supervillain team up that were scattered around the house because the stepdad, the old man, was a huge Doctor Doom fan. So anything with Doctor Doom was in the house. But he wrote one of my favorite moments of Doctor Doom. Okay. So Doctor Doom is actually down. These Atlanteans, Orca, Tiger Shark, and all this stuff. Anyway, Doctor, some other dude he was fighting. I can't remember. It's nobody you're going to remember. But anyway, they got Doctor Doom down. Right, he's down in the sand, and he reaches up and he finds these two. I don't want to call them torpedoes, little missiles that are left over from a fight. And what he does is he's like, nobody puts Doom down, right? I am Doom. You're down. He takes those two missiles, he pops them against together, and he blows himself and everybody up. And then he gets up and he has survived and he's in tatters. And that's what Doom will do for victory. This is a villain, a bad guy. And I'm sitting here going, hell yeah. And it's probably because of this very comic, if I had to guess, that I've always been a little bit more for the villains. Around the same time that I was reading this, I was also reading the Marvel Super Special, what was it, #1 or something, that the Kiss special. And Doctor Doom showed up in that in a ship that looked like the moon with everybody coming out and leaving a trail of flowers for him before he walked on him as he walked up to Kiss, right? Steve Gerber even wrote a great Doctor Doom in that and stuff like that. So yeah, but he goes, my armor withstood the blast. I live. Dr. Doom lives. Hear me, barbaric scum, or can you no longer hear? He's gloating over them. But he was willing. So he was willing to like take himself out, but he had ultimate faith in his armor that he built and things like that. It was going to happen, right? So that's the thing about Jim Shooter. Put this up, guys. Oh, come on. All right. That's the thing about Jim Shooter. There's these great moments, right? I loved his Star brand, right? That the first couple issues that he did, introducing this world. Spitfire the Troubleshooters, I think, came out the month before this, or these two came out in the same month. I don't really remember. But this was the one that really got me with John Romita art and stuff, right? That he was playing with the ideas and a little bit of sci-fi, but it was supposed to be in the real world. Now, the book really kind of slumped there in the middle, and they brought in other writers and stuff. But when John Byrne took over this, he brought in things that got in there. And from my understanding, John Byrne really had a problem with Jim Shooter, and Jim Shooter was from Pittsburgh. So when he gets this issue, John Byrne took this character. He took Pittsburgh. And he caused this character to blow up Pittsburgh, turned it into the Pit, which was a catalyst for the rest of the new universe. And from what I understand, sales actually went up after that event. But anyway, he came in and he has a psychologist character in this. He's a psychiatrist, psychologist who's a friend of his, and he brings him down and he lets this character know that you're an underachiever and you surround yourself with people you think you're better than to make yourself feel better. And all this stuff really tore him apart and then took the Star brand from him. But anyway, Star brand, I like the Star brand stuff, right? And then there's this one issue, Web of Spider-Man #34. Kind of feels like a fill-in issue before them, right? But this was a great story that Jim Shooter did. It's just a solid comic book story with stakes, right? This alien has come in. I used to know his name. It starts with an A. Has come in and he has captured the Watcher. And the Watcher and this alien, apparently this alien is a betting man. And he was like, how about you release me if we bet on something? So using his equipment, he finds a day that Spider-Man decides to play football with one arm tied behind his back with a bunch of kids in New York. And the Cosmic Gambit. So this was a great story drawn by Sal Buscema, written by Jim Shooter. This is actually one of my favorite Spider-Man stories. It's so simple. Nothing to really get hyped about. It's very direct with what it says. And I think Spider-Man starts getting the idea that other things are happening, because one of the things that happens is one of the kids ends up getting juiced up because the dude wants to cheat. The alien wants to cheat. He ends up juicing up one of the kids, if you will. All right. So it's kind of like if you're into the Sandlot, the Bad News Bears a little bit and stuff like that. Nowhere near nowhere near those movies, but in the same tradition, if you will, right? So yeah, it's fantastic. And like I said, it's just I remember reading that, and this was in the midst of Spider-Man and the Wolverine teaming up, and then the Web of Spider-Man. Maybe the issue before or after this, or around this time, had the sequel to that one shot that everybody's going crazy over because it revealed the Hobgoblin's identity and stuff at the time, right? All of a sudden, they just put out this. I love that. Anyway, if you're interested, that's Web of Spider-Man number 34. Then we have this through Defiant. And we got two bangers here at the end, right? Charlemagne number 1. I absolutely loved this story. Okay. In Vietnam, all right, there is a soldier who has gone missing. And he is left behind, I don't know how old he is in this 10, 11, 12-year-old kid. So this is the late 60s, early 70s, right? And this kid ends up running away from home, getting on freight, stolen away or whatever, making his way across the oceans in America and all this stuff to get to Vietnam. And he spends several years trying to find his brother, to where he actually becomes sort of legendary, that there's this little kid running around trying to find his brother in Vietnam. He finds his brother, and as he and his brother are running to each other, if I'm remembering right, I haven't read this in probably about a decade. They turn around and they end up getting blown up. So the brother dies, and the little kid ends up having his arms and legs blown off, and he's in a coma for like 20 years. And when he comes out of the coma, he's huge. He's this character here. He's huge. He's strong. He's regrown his limbs, right? And it turns out he has like sort of a cosmic purpose. This is the guy that's supposed to fight War Dancer. So you have War Dancer over here, and then you have Charlemagne over here, and these two guys are supposed to go at it. And eventually they start running into each other. Now, I'm not saying that the short-lived series is that good, or the War Dancer thing is what the main point is. It's this sort of boys fiction. I feel like I was reading a pulp novel more than a comic book with this fantastic one-issue story because it made sense. And then for people, Eric Breen, if you're out there, brother, here you go, the Korvac saga, right? I had to come around to this, right? I've heard years of the Korvac saga. I have sporadic issues of it. To me, it's where it doesn't feel like it's told sequentially. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like it really flowed. You got to have several issues. But at the time, this was a big deal. I read it. I was a little overwhelmed. There's a few cool things there. And then all of a sudden, something happened. I had my brain apparently had to adjust to the storytelling. And I'm like, yeah, this is a classic. My Korvac, Michael Korvac or whatever it was, is the dude that's in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, it's in the Thor annual that came out around 78, 79 back here that I have with the Guardians of the Galaxy in it, where Thor ends up in the future and all that stuff. And it's Korvac here, right? So yeah, like I said, I had sporadic issues, heard about a lot about this, and I dug it. But the tone and the way that Jim Shooter is writing them, yeah, it's kind of like read 4 or 5 issues, read 2 or 3 issues before Jim Shooter came on there to start plotting and writing this book, and then you can tell the difference and tell how this was special. So yeah, I had to be won over by the merit and actually absorbing the story more than reading it and stuff, right? So yeah, such great stuff in here. Yeah, Dave Wenzel. Yeah, so much Captain Marvel's in here. George Perez. It's great stuff. Yeah, so I concede. If you're out there, Eric Breen, I concede. Wow. Here we go. Check out some comments, show you the last book. Like I said, there'll be a video. All right, what we got here? Maverick, how are you doing, Maverick 77? James Gunn Superman sucks. We'll talk about that in a minute. Jim, let me see here. Jim Troubleshooter El Santo. Yeah, Black Samurai Kiss is awesome. Yeah, actually, I think it was in 77. The stepdad and my mom had probably been married about a year. I think I was 4 years old. I swear, I think there was a band called Angel for them. I actually got to go see Kiss, and I remember the smell of Marlboro, pot, body odor, dirty denim, and stuff. And I remember kind of watching Kiss. I might have been a little bit younger, maybe right 3 going into 4. Maybe I was a month from being 4 years old, if I remember right. I remember it was kind of cold. But anyway, it was in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I remember watching them, and I remember Gene coming out to do his bass thing where he would start hitting the bass and he would start bleeding from the mouth and then painting his tongue red with his tongue. And I remember Mom like grabbing me and walking me out. But I remember watching it over her shoulder going, whoa, you know what I mean? So that's my memory of Kiss. So yeah, that's the only time I saw Kiss. The universe line was a failure. I think it started picking up. That's the problem when they broke it down to 4 comics per month and made it direct market. I think it actually started turning a profit, but by that time nobody cared. And I just did a binge about 2 months ago of Peter David's Justice stuff. That was actually it was actually pretty good. Not great, but it was pretty good. Jim Shooter should have gotten Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko to create his new universe. Um, I think Kirby's eyesight was really, really bad by that time. He didn't. He was well on his way to being retired. They created characters that are still popular today. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Korvac killed the Avengers. Yeah. Victor Shea, Jim Shooter, had a huge impact on the comics I read as a kid. My first Avengers were those Squadron Supreme issues, and he took over writing right after that. I have all that stuff too. Yeah, I'm a huge Squadron Supreme fan. I like Earth 3, Crime Syndicate, Squadron Supreme. That's the crossover I want to see. I remember he was merciful and brought the Avengers back. He had godlike powers. Victor Shade, Korvac Saga is a prototype for Secret Wars. That's fantastic. That's a great way to look at that story. He crammed as many heroes as he could into it, with an all powerful villain. Yeah, I can see that. There is definitely some talk right there. Absolutely. Fantastic. So, the last thing, and this is the thing that I went back and forth on what do I think is maybe the greatest thing that is a Jim Shooter story, not a great comic book story of all time. That's not what I'm saying. And I went back and forth. His Magnus stuff is fantastic, but he was really picking up where Gold Key, Dale, Gold Key and them sort of picked up, and he sort of, what he did is that we knew North Am with Magnus the Robot Hunter, but he was like, what's underneath those cities in the sky? What's going on the other side of the world, like in Japan? He expanded on what was there and, of course, updated, created things. So to me, this is it. It was his Alpha and Omega, probably the first, I don't know, 8, 9 issues of his Dr. Solar book that he did with Valiant. He brought in quantum physics. He did some things that just kind of like, I don't know how he had to have studied quantum physics to come up with some of these ideas, but we have a hero who's in the middle of a nuclear reactor that ends up destroying a world. He also absorbs himself. You know what I mean? By when he jumps to another world, um, and he ends up remaking the world, the entire universe, and due to the fact that he was a comic book collector and stuff, that made it possible to where little weird things could happen in the Valiant universe, where we had immortals and geomancers and things like that in the realm of possibility and stuff like that. And of course, it was spider aliens that I always laughed about because I felt like it was David Bowie inspired, the spider aliens from Mars and stuff like that. But yeah, I think Alpha and Omega is probably his best work. Especially the stuff with those Barry Windsor Smith covers and the backup stories that's going on. And of course, what he was doing with Valiant as sort of a stunt to get you going before, stunts were the thing in the 90s and things like that, is that you were building the world's biggest comic book panel page by page and stuff. And that's in here and stuff, right? So this is the slipcase. I finally have all the issues and stuff like that. But yeah, just the things that he did in this with the storytelling and the characterization and the build up, the callbacks, the things that he was setting up, the structure. Like I said, it's just fantastic stuff, right? So that's Jim Shooter. And like I said, I hope to do a proper video at some point, right? Okay. Cayman X. Carmen X. Yeah, Cayman X. Jim Shooter. let me give you something to look at so you stop seeing my face. But anyway, Cayman X, what do we got here? Jim Shooter, a controversial yet impactful editor in chief. The man made two companies. I wonder how the world would look like if he bought Marvel. He made three with Broadway Comics, but I don't know the history behind that. And I think I've read like one issue, Starseed or something. I don't know. I don't feel like that really took off. I have been told it was really good, and I do need to delve into it, but I just really haven't had the interest. Hey, just got here, JP Fawn. Good to see you. I'm guessing that you already talked to James. No, I'm saving it. I'm giving time for everybody to wake up, get their coffee, and sit down. Actually, we're getting ready to go into it. Now that everybody's here, I appreciate the numerous reprint fill-ins stopped when Shooter took over. That was a problem right in the middle of a storyline. Hated that. I know what you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. He made people work, and I think that was a lot of the problem for a lot of these people is that, hey, you know what I mean? Like, I think that where he treated it as a job and expected an ounce of professionalism from people, I think they lost their minds. And the people who could be professional and put out work, and I think the people who like the workhorses, the guys that were doing 2-3 books a month, wanted just Jim to just leave them alone. Your Chris Claremonts, your John Burns and stuff. You know what I mean? A lot of people took off. One of the controversies, guys, for Jim Shooter when as soon as he took over is it was well known that he did not believe that a writer should also be their own editor. So if you go back and you look like at Invaders, or anything by Roy Thomas, anything by Marv Wolfman, like his Dracula and stuff, if I remember right. I know Marv Wolfman was one of them. I may be getting the book wrong, but it was writer, editor, and their name. And you'll see that when they went to DC, they were their own writer, editor. Roy Thomas and All Star Squadron. I need to look at Teen Titans. I can't remember off the top of my head. Dick Giordano. I saw Dick Giordano at Heroes Con back in the early 2000s tell Roy when they brought this up that, hey, I had no problem doing that. You knew what you were doing, Roy. It was not a problem, right? But one of them, I don't know if it was Marv Wolfman or if it was Roy Thomas, but apparently as soon as it was announced that Jim Shooter was taking over and they knew that he was not going to allow writers to be their own editors, one of them called him up and said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So when Roy Thomas jumped ship, that was like Stan Lee jumping ship, because Roy Thomas was molded by Stan Lee to kind of take his spot writing wise and stuff. I'm oversimplifying this. And then Marv took off. Okay. Can you imagine if they got Henry Cavill to play Hyperion? That would be a good idea. That would be perfect. No, we haven't discussed Superman yet. Henry Cavill would be more suited to play Captain Britain. I can actually see that. Any big muscled guy, but he has to be in a leadership position. You know what I mean? Thanks for telling me. I was waiting to talk about the movie. Yeah. Morning, Tim. Hope all's good. Great to see you. Gene Paul Ace Peter there was one of the OGs of the comic community popping up out of nowhere. Look at that. That's true. No problem. Okay, here we go, man. All right. So, guys, I have a video that I actually made just a few days ago that's up about Superman being an immigrant story and being influenced by the story of Moses and things, right? So, and I said that the controversy that came before this, where James Gunn came out and decided to say the immigrant story and stuff, I feel like that's a marketing ploy, okay? With the current situation, what's going on out there, I'm not going to get into that. But what was going on when he was writing the Superman script, he actually had pictures. James Gunn had pictures of himself with All Star Superman right there, and for helping with the atmosphere and the tone and things like that, and the Superman he wanted to get from the comics and everything like that. So he did not have a crystal ball to know what was currently going on, right? So I feel like that was a marketing ploy, one more little marketing ploy to make sure that this movie goes viral and stuff, right? And people started calling it woke. Well, I can tell you that it is not woke. I went and saw it yesterday at 1 p.m. So let's get that out of the way, okay? What we have here is a movie of Superman to where I absolutely loved it. I know I saw things in there that I feel like only people who read the DC comics, especially the era that I was in, would pick up on. Mr. Terrific was fantastic. Metamorpho did not have the personality that he had in the books, but he was still Metamorpho. We got to see him as Squiggly Man and as a cloud with a head on it. We got the visuals of him and the way his powers worked were spot on. Okay. And some other things in there. Like, well, this is going to be spoil talk, guys. There's going to be some spoil talk on there, right? Guy Gardner was Guy Gardner, right? And he ended up being a little kind of pretty cool back then. I personally could not wait for the world, the Muggle world, right? All right, guys, I always do this. This is what I'm talking about. If you read comic books, man, right? We're in our own little bubble. And then every now and then, like the Death Star approaching, the world gets to come in and get a little taste of a proper comic book talk, proper comic book characters and the way they work. And they either come in and all of a sudden they're all judgy and they're like, oh, this is garbage. Or they come in and they pillage and gut and leave everything a freaking dead husk behind them, right? So yeah, that's why I'm sort of like, this is a comic book movie, guys. I'm not saying that this is the best version of Superman. I'm not saying that this is the most faithful version of Superman. But when you go see this, this is a comic book movie, right? This is not a faithful adaptation of anything like The Crow in Sin City. Those needed that, right? This isn't even American Splendor, where we sort of get to take our time and go through the life of Harvey Pekar. What we run into is a movie that feels like you get to go into a comic book store right now and find out that all this stuff is already in motion, right? You pick up a comic book, oh my, there's already several issues already going on with this, because when the movie starts, right, we actually get some text. And I'm kind of going by memory. I'm going to see the movie again, right? The stepson did not go with us to see it, so I have an excuse to to go again. So not that I need one. I'm a grown man. I can go anytime I want. So as we come in there and it says something like 300 years ago, the first metahuman came up. And then he keeps the theme going. Then 30 years ago, a child was rocketed from a dying planet Krypton. 3 minutes ago, Superman got his first defeat in battle. And 3 years ago, he had just popped up in this world, right? That's all you need to know. Character heroes are already established. There's a scene real quick that I caught where Guy Gardner is sitting there eating a bowl of Fruity Pebbles in a diner, watching the news, and there's people around him, and it feels normal. Their heroes are already established here. We're not getting origin stories. We're not seeing the Avengers come together. We're getting what I've always wanted, where we've had so many movies of Superman and Batman, we don't need the origin issue. We know who they are, right? And then they sprinkle in things that are just from the comics, okay? And when they sprinkle these things in, I'm just sitting here, they feel normal to me, so I can't really judge how people are taking this stuff. Of course, everybody knew Crypto was coming, right? We had the Fortress of Solitude. We had the robots, even though they don't look, the robots are there, but they don't really, they look like robots. They're not Superman robots where they look like him. You know what I'm saying? We have Jorah, Lara, and Jor-El up there stuff, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That's something that people do this. But what this does, guys, is that this is the beginning of the DCU. This is still written in a way to where we are, even though this is a DC universe that is already in motion and has existed, we are still, there's just enough here where we're getting seeds planted for the other movies that are coming. This is in the introduction, guys. Okay, this is still it has its own plot, it has its own villains, it has its own stories, it has its own high stakes, but this is the DC universe, guys. This is what they do. All right. Go back and look at Dread, the Dread movie, the one that the fact that we don't have a 2012 Dread movie that we don't have a sequel for, which is a crime against nature. That movie is just a day in the life of Judge Dredd. That's one case. This is what they do every day. That's kind of how this feels, right? Now, tonally, if you're looking for a film, all right, this is a movie. This is not a film. This is a great comic book film where the colors are bright, all right, the characters are interesting and things like that. Kids are going to love it, even though there's a few spots in there where there's some harsh language. I'll just go ahead and tell you, little grown-up talk here and there. And tonally, this is one of the things that I feel people are going to have a problem with if they're looking for pacing and things like that, right? Comic books month to month have an energy. I think I remember Alex Ross being the guy to talk about this, right? And I agreed with him, right? I never put my finger on it. But when comic books had to come out month to month, all right, and you had these guys sitting down, they got to get 22 pages in, and they were just coming in and they're doing page after page. You had Kirby doing all these panels of action and stuff and fights and everything, and that guy was doing 15 panels a month. There is an energy created in that where you're not going back and refining your work, right? And you're in a probably got your adrenaline going or something where you got to get this in and you're drawing fast and you're not refining things. That's the energy of this movie after it finally gets started. Okay. It starts out with the clip that everyone has seen, right? After we get past that exposition I was talking about, all of a sudden Superman is falling from the sky, crashes in the snow. He's been had the hell beat out of him. Crypto comes, take me home, Crypto, and we get to see the Fortress of Solitude. Then we get to see that he is Clark Kent. All right, you know what I mean? We get to see the goofy Clark Kent walking through Metropolis. We get to see the Daily Planet. He kind of gets picked on by Steve Lombard. If you know the comics, it's all there. You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh, they did it. You know what I mean? That's cool, you know, and everything. But then we have a moment. There's this one part of the movie. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes into it. I don't know. I wasn't timing the thing. I was into the movie, but it's the only scene I really didn't like. And it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? But all of a sudden, Superman keeps, when Clark Kent is watching the news and they're showing clips of Ultraman, who's actually the hammer that they were talking about that handed his ass. They're talking about Superman was defeated, and Clark's like, well, I don't say he beat his ass or anything. You go, how would you know that? Would you know that he was using a fake accent? Clark, he's like, well, I interviewed Superman, and Lois is calling him out saying, you interview Superman a lot. Uh, Turns out they're already dating. They're 3 months into dating. Apparently 3 was a thing in this movie, the power of 3. I don't know. So they're hanging out at Lois's house, I guess. They're doing their 3 month anniversary thing. Clark is cooking for her as she walks in, and he decides to let Lois go ahead and interview him since Clark always does it. And it gets real heated, and even Clark is yelling at her like, "What are you doing? You're twisting things or something." I don't know. But there's things here where I know we had to get the plot, we had to get the exposition, we had to have these people be people. I mean, the whole thing is I get that it was important to the movie, it needs to be done, but I was just like, oh God, can we just get on with this? So I was very happy when it was over and the plot went. Then we have our antagonist of Lex Luthor. Guys, this is the best Lex Luthor that I've seen on there. And the guy was meticulous. He was evil. He was emotional. He thinks he's the good guy because Superman is an alien. He pulled out the Grant Morrison. I can see the Grant Morrison Lex Luthor xenophobic dude from All Star Superman. Right? It's right there. The actor, which I wish I could remember his name and stuff, nailed it. Right? And this guy is just evil, you know. He's got the Lex core going, or Luthor core, you know, and he's meticulous. And I won't ruin everything for you with this guy and stuff like that. But there's even a good plot that Lois gets to do as an investigative reporter to turn around and figure out how Lex was able to turn the world against Superman, because that's what happens here, right? Okay, let me get here. All right, Victor Shade saw it. JP Fawn. We're going to go to the. We're going to get a. We're going to get a fantastic DC universe on screen. Like I said, this planted the seeds for something very special if they're able to stick to landing. So yeah, absolutely. All my family members are productive citizens, and none of them are on public support. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, El Santo, there's some questions there that I can't answer. We'll get bogged down, and You, I've read comics for 77 years and stuff. 77 years since 1977. Excuse me, for years and years I've read comics and stuff. So just by knowing the history of the DC universe, I know things that he could be touching on. You know what I mean? The heroes of World War II and stuff. Don't let things like that bog you down. Either the movies may explore it further, the TV shows may explore it further, or you can just get some who's comics and things like that. El Santo, the new Superman movie confused me. Um, Maybe it was just too much. That's what I was saying. I mean, there's a lot of comic book references in there and stuff. The new Superman movie. A lot of people don't know anything about these characters, Black Samurai, and it's a great introduction to them. Mr. Terrific. The feedback that I got, my wife actually called me a weirdo because two men walked by me. I'm like, "What did we think?" And they were like, "Loved it." Everybody that was walking out of that theater, I could tell, had a big smile on their face. They loved it. Mr. Terrific really blew people away. Some people liked Metamorpho. They made them curious. It's like they're ready for more Mr. Terrific. They want to know more about Metamorpho. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Okay. I'm not the kind of El Santo. I'm not the kind of person that follows social media. The movies seem to be aimed at kids that spend all their time on TikTok. Well, they had a part there where they did acknowledge it. Okay. So there's parts in the movie where when Lois was interviewing Clark, like I said, she was bringing up the fact of what they were saying on social media. Clark is like, I'm barely on that. I don't do it. And it's because there were certain hashtags coming up. And the one that got him was hashtag super shit. Right. So Lex Luthor has a pocket dimension that he made. Right. And in that pocket dimension, not only does he have cubicles where he keeps people prisoner, even his ex-girlfriends, and things like that, but he has a bunch of monkeys hooked up that get on Twitter, and they're the ones that are the real influencers on Twitter. All they do is constantly type on X, Twitter, and everything, doing all this stuff, and Superman's like, so that's where hashtag super shit came from, right? So yeah, it took a little shot there at people on X and Twitter and stuff, right? It's El Santo. I'm sorry, I fell asleep during the movie. Lois was a girl boss. Black Samurais. What were they arguing about? Lois being a. I'm not a fan of the character Lois Lane in general. I've never understood what Clark sees in her. I really don't. You know what I'm saying? But in this one, it's not so much that I thought she was a girl boss. I thought it was going to go that way. What got me is that she's always been a star reporter. So instead of like Mary Sue and her, you know what I mean, making her a Mary Sue, making her great at everything, she was a great reporter in this. She did exactly what she's supposed to do. And instead of making her like completely do it 100% on her own, they made Jimmy Olsen a great character also in this. You know what I mean? The Daily Planet felt like it was a team effort in newspaper with its shining stars. You know what I'm saying? This is our great quarterback. This is our great lineman. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. They didn't overdo it. I know one twist the movie, but that's it. Came in X. Let me go on down here. If Luthor has a clone of Superman, then why don't they frame him? I'll try to answer that. I think I have an idea of why. Because they did tell you just enough things about the clone. The Marvels was a better movie. You've got to be kidding me, Maverick 77 Defender. You've got to be kidding. You can enjoy the Marvels all you want, but I could not finish that movie. That was pretty bad. Hancock Will Smith was a better movie. Hancock was a good movie in general, but that's its own mythology and stuff, right? I kind of see why you want to compare the two, put them in there to Superman like character with the powers and stuff, but they're a race of gods is basically what they are. They're not even sure what they were. The monkeys made me think of Brainiac and his monkey. Exactly. How did the pocket dimension have internet? Because Lex Luthor, you know, it's Lex Luthor. He had. I'll explain here in a minute. Here, I hope it gets people curious enough to maybe pick up a comic book. She was unlikable in this movie. Yeah, I always find Lois Lane unlikable. I've never liked her. Why did Lois dress like a man? El Santo? Why did Lois dress like a man? I don't know what that means. Um, I didn't see her wearing an actual suit and tie, so I'm not sure. Uh, was the message from Clark's parents altered by Lex Luthor? I think it was the Black Samurai. So now we're having people jump ahead and they're talking about little things to pick apart in the movie and things. And some of those can kind of be sort of explained. The fact that they had let me slow down. So basically, Lex Luthor has a pocket dimension, right? And this pocket dimension, he meets with people. He is able to keep people in these big cubicles and stuff, prisoner. And the main plot is basically that Superman, as he has done in the comics before, back in the 80s and stuff, is that one nation was coming after a weaker nation. Superman flew in, stopped the bigger nation, from taking over the little nation. And some people are think it was the great thing. Some people think you acted out like vigilante like. Did you converse with the president? Did you converse with the State Department? He was like, people are going to get killed. We know the country and all that stuff like that. So this bigger country that was able to invade the place, this turns out to be a big plot by Lex Luthor just for two reasons: to have an excuse to kill Superman because he knew C made it to where Superman got involved, but he also had been giving out $8 billion worth of weapons to this little country, and he only charged $1 billion, and that's what Lois Lane was investigating. In the pocket dimension, the dictator of that country was meeting with Lex in the pocket dimension. Now, you'll notice in the pocket dimension, if we want to stop and really try to pick things apart, they had electricity. So it is not a stretch that they would have phone lines and broadband and things like that. Lex Luthor is a criminal genius. The bigger thing I'd be asking is that why are you kind of concerned that there was internet in there when you should be asking how the hell do you make a pocket dimension? Okay, you know what I mean? There's bigger things here. And that was the great thing about having Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific had a few moments where he kind of gave you the heaviness of what Lex Luthor is and how evil and reckless he is. He reveals that the reason you don't make a pocket dimension is because if your math is off by anything, it's that close, you make a black hole, and the black hole exists where Earth used to be. It would suck up the Earth right there. You know what I mean? So anyway, in that pocket dimension, you already start seeing Luthor become more and more maniacal. More and more maniacal. He's not just when he's not obsessed with Superman, you get to see how his cruelty is to other people and stuff. He has ex-girlfriends in there, things like that. And he gets Superman in there, and of course he uses Metamorpho. He actually gets with the State Department. The State Department are not down for what Luthor wants to do, right? So he makes more things happen. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, you got it. And he is allowed to capture Superman, and he puts him in this pocket dimension where, technically he's not breaking any laws. It's a non-place. There's no jurisdiction for anybody, but he has Metamorpho in there, and he's making Metamorpho work for him by having his kid in the cubicle across from him, his baby, and he's able to make kryptonite because he's the element man, right? And there's little things knowing that Metamorpho is going to pop up because they actually end up for real quick at Stag Industries. You got to look at the names of these companies and stuff and everything that's in the background. It's the DC universe. If you know anything about Metamorpho, you know about the Stag Industries and stuff, right? And I've never in the world thought I was ever going to see, even in a little cameo, Sapphire Stag. That was wild, So if you know, you know. That's the problem with this. I'm a DC guy. I've always been a DC guy. I've known all this stuff, right? So how did Luthor end up turning the world around, right? So you have Ultraman, who actually plays two parts, and I guessed that it was going to be a Bizarro, right? Because they revealed that in order to have the doors open for the Fortress of Solitude, instead of having the gigantic key and stuff, it's got to respond to his genetic code. So as soon as they were able to open the door with the engineer from who will be an authority, the movie, the group and all that stuff like that, I was like, oh, because he's covered from head to toe with goggles and stuff. And I actually was waiting to see if we were going to find out that he was actually the Martian Manhunter as a twist. That was just my wishful thinking, but it was obvious from those doors open. I knew exactly who it was, right? So anyway, so as they get in there, they find that Clark has a piece of the message that he plays of Jor-El and his Kryptonian parents talking to him, and they're talking about be a good man and hope and stuff, and they lost pieces of it. The engineer gets in there with her nanobites in the computer system, and she's able to save the rest of it. And they're telling him that you're supposed to lord over these people, get a harem, and start populating the world with half Kryptonian people and take it over and stuff. And that comes out. Luthor gets that out on TV shows, and it goes viral. Right when they were like distracting Superman with a kaiju, they had a gigantic kaiju when we get the Justice Gang that gets to come in, right? So good stuff in there. The plots are just there to get things moving. They sort of make sense. These are what comic book villains do. That's the whole point of all this, right? Um, so yeah, Luthor is a bad person. We're just finally getting to the point, right? This is a villain, right? I've seen a lot of people get mad for villains doing terrible things to women. They do terrible things to men. They do terrible things to children. That's why they're villains. That's why you need heroes. But anyway, I digress. We'll stick to the movie and stuff, right? So anyway, all this, so he's got Superman in the pocket dimension, and then he makes a deal with Metamorpho. I can save your kid if you'll give me a break here. So Metamorpho finally lets him up. He takes away the kryptonite, but there's no sun in this pocket dimension, and we have Metamorpho use his elements to make something sun-like to kind of recharge Superman. Superman is depowered in this a lot by lack of, solar. That's where we go back to the comics. He needs solar radiation, and they play a lot with that. He's got a yellow sun radiation. They mention red sun in this at some point, stuff like that. So they play by the rules in there. And then this part is just where when they're escaping from the pocket dimension, this is where you just got to let it go and realize it's a comic book movie, because there's a lot going on there that I'm not going to cover. But this is your action sequence. This is Mr. Terrific's great scene where you get to see how he fights and what he's all about as he finds the portal to the pocket dimension and plays back off the math of Lex and stuff. And Lois Lane is our eyes and this and stuff like that, right? And, it's a comic book adventure, right? This would be issue 3 lead into issue 4. You know what I mean? So we get our adventure and stuff. And then all of a sudden, as things go by, we will talk about the Jor-El Lara thing. I think I skipped ahead there, right? So they are saying, is this real? Is that message real and stuff? Yes, they came in and they went over and over how Mr. Terrific said, I know tech guys. Lex Luthor claimed that over like 30 people who are experts in linguistics and doing this, everybody came up that the rest of the message really was about Superman being a Kryptonian and needing to take over the earth and stuff, right? But the question is, guys, is that you got to remember this is the DC universe, right? We've already seen all these elements of Superman, and in my mind, there's several things that could go on. Number one, it is true, okay? If you go back to the comics, especially with the John Byrne stuff that I had laying out here somewhere, yeah, there's an actual comic book where Superman has a fever dream due to kryptonite poisoning and things like that of what it'd be like if the Kryptonians took over the Earth. We also have in, where's it at? Yeah, the Man of Steel here. And you get the point. That in the Man of Steel, that when Jor-El shows her Earth, she shows a wheat field with a farmer on it with a bare chest holding a pitchfork. And she's like, oh my God, he's touching the dirt and he's not in a bodysuit and that's his skin. She is totally revolted by the place. Jor-El was the exception. So, yeah, maybe one, it's true. Okay. Number two, who says that is actually Jor-El and Kara with that message? All right. We have the Phantom Zone. There's a whole plethora of evil Phantom Zone villains out there. We have General Zod that people know. How do we know that Bradley Cooper playing Jor-El isn't going to pop up in a future movie where we find out that they're posing as the parents and then Clark is going to discover a real one? Who knows? You know what I'm saying? Or maybe they have the technology to make themselves look like Lara and Jor-El. Maybe they're the ones that damaged the message and then they made themselves look like them and finish the message with that. I don't know. It's kind of wild to me that you have two at the beginning, and I'm reading into it, right? I could possibly just be reading into it, but you have a positive message, and then all of a sudden it's kind of convenient that when you get the rest of the message, it's about world domination. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is that this could be a plot point. And a lot of people, that's the biggest thing that I have seen people be angry over. And I didn't hear anybody in real life as we were like in the theater and stuff like that talking about it. But I've seen people very mad, but so many people are so mad about the Snyderverse not being used. And I mean, good God, guys, we're in a whole different decade. How many James Bonds have you seen? How many Batman have we seen? And these things move forward. It's more about the character than the actor. I mean, I'm the guy who grew up with a bunch of Doctor Who's. I know these things that a lot of people, a lot of actors are just there for so long, you know. But anyway, that's why you got to be responsible with these franchises and stuff, right? So anyway, getting back to the movie, So anyway, things finally get to where Jimmy Olsen is doing his thing. He knows Lex Luthor's girlfriend. She's going to provide Jimmy with a bunch of stuff that is going to help save the day. We'll just leave it at that. Like I'm all for spoilers, but we'll leave a little something here and there, right? And then all of a sudden it comes down to it where Superman has a choice to make, right? The invasion is going to happen again, right? The invasion is coming again, and this is where you had the people standing out in the desert, and you can tell they're the underdogs here because they have like farming equipment that they're going to fight with, and little kids have taken pieces of cloth and they wrote the Superman symbol on it, and they're flying up with the flag and they're praying for Superman to come. The kids are all chanting Superman's name, and all of a sudden Superman, as he's sitting there and getting his mind back together with Ma and Pa Kent, hears about this. And the Ma and Pa Kent in this, I've got to tell you, man, I dug them. I like the Ma and Pa Kent. I like them so much. My wife liked them. I wanted more Ma and Pa Kent, to tell you the truth. I wanted more of Superman for all seasons. That was Superman for all seasons in his bedroom. There's even a shot of Crypto laying on his chest in his childhood bed. Um, Recovering from the kryptonite poison and stuff like that, that I'm like, I could go look at the book because that's something straight out of Four Seasons. You know what I mean? All seasons, excuse me, for all seasons. Tim Sale, Jeff Loeb book, I got a video where I showed that book talking about what was going to influence this movie. So anyway, just when he's like going to go stop this war and all this stuff, we find out that Luthor has freaking lost it. He has reopened the pocket universe portal, and now it is spilling out into the real world, and it's making a straight line of anti-proton river that leads to a black hole going straight for Metropolis. So Superman, are you going to say Metropolis, or are you going to go stop this war and stuff like that, right? And I'm not going to spoil anything there for you, right? What happens, how does this get resolved, or anything like that. But we're going to skip ahead, and we're going to talk about Ultraman. So, like I said, I already figured out that this was a Bizarro situation stuff, and people were saying, "Why don't you just frame him with that?" Well, there's a couple things, and this is just from reading comic books and a little bit of thinking these through, with if logically. That's a good way to put it, right? So basically, Lex Luthor went round and round and round to all these places that Superman had popped up for 3 years, and he found a single strand of hair, and he cloned him. But it turns out that Ultraman is dumber than Clark himself. So the guy's an idiot. So he cloned him, but it's a dumb clone. And Luthor constantly speaks through a speaker box on his chest, and he has a team of people that are constantly typing in codes that tell Ultraman how to fight and stuff. Lex Luthor calls the codes, and a bunch of people are constantly typing in to tell him how to move and what to do and everything like that, right? So Luthor has come up with 2,500 ways to take down Superman. He doesn't have the brawn to do it, but he's got the brain to do it, and they talk about that stuff, right? So as soon as he finds out it's a clone of him with long hair and he's dumb and stupid, that's if I'll bring up a possibility why he didn't just use this clone to look like Superman, right? Several reasons, because he's dumb. Too many things could go wrong. The other thing is that Superman could show up and be in the same space as that guy at the same time. All sorts of things, right? So it's better to keep him masked and tell him what to do and use him as a chess piece in the bigger story, which is what they did. So yeah, he didn't really get too symbolic with it, like with I'm fighting my dark side, like Scott Pilgrim when he met anti-Scott, negative, what was it, negative Scott or whatever and stuff, right? Nega Scott, whatever and stuff like that. So we didn't have that kind of symbolic stuff, but things keep moving. The heroes keep doing what they're going to do, and they're doing what heroes are supposed to. They even had the Hall of Justice in this, guys, which I thought was hilarious. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. If you're into comic books, man, I think you're going to have a good time with this if you're into DC and stuff like that. Um, so we get to the ending. So let's just get to the ending. I'm gonna skip ahead to the ending, and this may be my second or third real critical thing and stuff, man. But I'm trying to keep an open mind. But at the end of it, he talks about crypto. Crypto was also kidnapped. I skipped over that, you know. So some of the stuff was just plot elements and stuff, right? Some people tried to act like the whole movie was about the dog, and it was not. Crypto was a character in it and stuff, right? So he had to get to, he was able to save him in the pocket dimension, and there's some funny stuff that happens. But anyway, the way the characters played amongst each other, and you know, Mr. Terrific has his T spheres, and then all of a sudden you have a dog that likes to chase balls. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That it was funny how you knew why these things were happening. That made sense, right? Then anyway, skip to the end. But they kind of mentioned like people were surprised with Superman going, "You have a dog?" He's like, "It's more of a foster situation." And I was trying to put that together. Like, what does that mean? And then at the end of it, we get an appearance, right? There is one cameo that I'm not going to spoil for you in the movie, but at the end of it, I'm going to give you the second cameo and stuff like that. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. First of all, when I saw the two, maybe three, I think it was, we'll say two for sure. When I saw the two actors that they had actually announced were up for Supergirl, I can't believe the one they went with, whoever this girl is, right? I've seen her in something, and I was just sort of like confused why James Gunn would go with her. What's he seeing in her? So I'm trying to be open minded, not do what I did when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman. But I finally got to see her just for a little bit in the movie. But the girl that's playing Supergirl, Miley something or whatever her name is. Um, but I did not like this take on Supergirl because it turns out Superman was watching crypto because Supergirl likes to go to planets with red suns to party. And I'm sitting here like, dear God, have they turned her into a Paris Hilton with a purse puppy in crypto and stuff? And it was kind of funny how Crypto acted when she saw Supergirl. Supergirl looked like she was either wasted or hungover. And Crypto was just so happy to see her that he was actually smashing her to the ground, and she was laughing in the ground, just cracking and all this stuff. And Superman's talking to one of his super robots, sitting there going, "That's why this dog has behavior issues, you know, no boundaries, no things like that." And I'm like, oh, that's hilarious. So I know there's a Supergirl coming up in a year, but I don't know. I have no problem with writing Supergirl as young. You know what I mean? She is Supergirl and stuff like that. But if they're going to turn her into like a party girl or something, I'm just sort of like, I may be out before I'm even in. Okay, you know what I mean? I'm like, I no, no, reckless. I know. And I tried to read an issue of the Tom King Supergirl World of Tomorrow or whatever that book is and stuff, and I found it unreadable with beautiful art. You know. So anyway, that's my take. I think it's a fantastic comic book movie. This is not film. You know what I mean? This is not Woody Allen. You know what I mean? This is a comic book world. I'm introducing you to the comic book world, and we have plans for the future, right? So this is your introduction to it. And this is DC Comics, right? So this was a Superman story. All right. We should have a break, and we're going to get another Superman story. This is a day at work, is what this was, right? I remember when I saw the Avengers movie, and I had a girl I was dating at the time. We actually lived together for a little bit and stuff. I remember going to the movie with her, and she just kind of looked at me and was like, "Is this what it's like reading comics for you?" And I said, "Every month, that's the Superman movie. This is reading DC Comics. This is not reading Marvel." Okay. DC Comics always sort of had this intentional or unintentional a bit more positivity, where with a lot of Marvel books, you can kind of come out being a little bit bummed every now and then. You know what I mean? I've always felt like, and Kurt Busiek pointed this out in the Justice League Avengers crossover of the early 2000s, where, you know, some of the DC heroes decided to look at some of the Marvel heroes and let them know, you don't do enough. You know, and that's what it felt like. All right. So let's look at the comments here. We may just end it there. I'm not going to show the books unless you guys have more questions. All right, guys, lot of comments. A lot of comments. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to cover them all, but I'm going to pick and choose here. Okay, Silver Pocket Universe was very Doctor Who, exactly. Okay. Doctor Who had better writing. Black Samurai, Doctor Who had better writing halfway through the Capaldi run. I've tried to jump on the last two Doctors, and it just was not going to happen, in my opinion. In all fairness, it required multiple episodes to tell a Doctor Who story. Oh, they're talking about Doctor Who. Let's see what we got here. There we go. Cayman X, you get it. Haven't seen the movie, but pocket dimensions are very comic book thing. Yes, they are. That's what I'm getting at. This is a comic book movie. It's fantastic. I think it's really going to separate the casual viewers of movies from the comic book people. We always need a little bit of a purge every now and then. Black Samurai, the Justice Gang were outlaws who didn't really have any respect for human life. They're supposed to be the cool superheroes of the movie. But see, this is, and I think that's exactly what they were supposed to be. And they made sure to show that Superman wanted to save the kaiju. They explained that they had the conversation where he said, at least we could have done something different or euthanize it, something less painful. And those guys went straight into it. We've got the Authority movie coming in. We got things building up. I would not be surprised if we weren't building up to like a Kingdom Come situation, guys. I don't know. But to me, that's what I'm saying, where it feels like things are coming. I'm not even defending or disagreeing with what you're saying. You know what I mean? But they are a gang. They're not league. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's intentional. So I think you pointed out something that you may not have liked it. I don't know your tone in this, but I think that's one of the things that's going to be addressed. Is what I'm trying to get at. Because if you notice, Superman really isn't a member of that team. Can't have Martian Manhunter, too many weird characters at this point. Gunn loves those weird characters, so I don't know. Maybe it's all about how I don't know. I think it's a little bit unpredictable who's coming in. I'm waiting on Plastic Man. I feel like Plastic Man is a Gunn character. I don't know. Well, versions of Hawkman and Hawk Girl have been killed. I don't know what versions are in this movie, and we'll see. Hawkman and Hawk Girl have been a mess since Crisis on Infinite Earth, and they were actually fixed by Jeff Johns for a while. Then they messed them up again. How did Metamorpho make kryptonite if it didn't exist? He would have to have known the composition to make it. Lex Luthor, criminal genius. No doubt in my mind that when he got a piece of kryptonite at some point, he probably had it. I mean, it's been done in the comics. He had kryptonite gloves. There's been fake kryptonite made before. There's a whole spectrum of kryptonite. It's still an element. So, I mean, I kind of get how you're questioning it, but to me, it's not a big deal because of what's been done in comics so many times. I mean, he even referenced, he kind of got it wrong. I'm about ready to pull out the book I have here, but Superman, he even referenced hypno goggles. But the problem with that is that it wasn't the goggles, it was actually Superman himself, a super hypnosis. But people see Clark Kent and he looks a little bit older and a little bit more frail because Superman in the Bronze Age was constantly putting out this hypnosis to help with the glasses disguise. They referenced that. So, yeah. I noticed that Superman was trying to take the giant kaiju alive, but just came along and killed it. Yeah. I had a huge problem with the way they were going for the eyes and that. That bothered me. The engineer altered the message following Luthor's instructions. They didn't really come out and say that. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be in another movie, or maybe I need to rewatch it again. Yeah, what you said about the parents with the twist, I heard it. Yeah, I don't know if I like it or not. Smallville had a similar approach with his parents at one point. It hammers home the point that he is molded by the Kents, also a Byrne approach. Yeah. And you saw a lot of that with the Superman family books of the 70s that I read when they had Super Baby, trying to instill some stuff on him here and there. Okay. They were very confusing. They looked like third worlders who were living hand to mouth somewhere in the middle of the desert. Hmm. See, there's a country called Kurak. It's in comics. I think Marv Wolfman introduced it in the '80s. So I kind of figured that's who they were talking about. Oh yeah, yeah. That's another thing I noticed. I got to think about this after I processed it. The Lex Luthor thing with the dictator, the thing where I told you that he gave him $8 billion worth of weapons, but only charged him a million or a billion, I mean, for it. It turns out that there is a map exposed in this in the future where half the country split in half, and half of that country ends up being ruled by Lex Luthor as their king and stuff. That was the goal. He was going to get half a country. I laughed because to me that felt like a wink and a nod to the the Christopher Reeves, Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor, where he was all about real estate. I was like, well, that may be a stretch, but I thought that was hilarious. I thought Superman was indestructible. Why was he bleeding all over the place in the movie? It's all in there in the movie. It's all referenced. Super, he. That's what I'm trying to say. Every logical thing in there that you're asking, if you watch the movie and slow down, it's all talked about in there. Solar radiation. He's a battery. Batteries have to be recharged. The first thing they do to heal him is hit him with the sun. So yeah, it's all from the comic books, man. There's even stories about what happens when he's under a red sun and a blue sun and things. It's all been referenced before. That's what I'm saying. That's why the movie made sense to me. It's all in there. Didn't Supergirl already have a movie? Yeah, and bless her heart. Help me out, guys. Helen Slater. Helen Slater, was that her name? That poor girl did everything she could with everything she was handed in that movie. She was a great Supergirl, but she's the Peter Capaldi of the Doctor Who people. A great Doctor Who, and then they just didn't give her what she needed. Metamorpho was hideous. He's supposed to be. Yep. Superman will never get to a billion. And what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? We still have the movie. This whole thing about the $1 billion thing and stuff, I totally get that if we want a franchise to go on and stuff, it's very important for it to profit. But I come from an era where I have Dark Crystal, I have Labyrinth, I have Escape from New York, I have Big Trouble in Little China. I could probably move up into the 90s. I have The Phantom, I have The Shadow. I have all these movies that didn't make a profit and they were actually flops. Blade Runner, Tron. All these movies are now classics and they're starting to like remake them and stuff like that. This whole thing about it making $1 billion and things like that's a nothing burger to me. That's a DC versus Marvel thing, and I've been over that for years, man. And then there's a lot of people who are just so bitter about this Snyderverse thing not going on. Guys, he dropped out because he had a kid self-delete themselves. You know what I mean? Like things had to move on and everything like that. That was a big factor. I thought that was their door to allow him to get out of the corner that he was stuck in and stuff like that. But time has gone by. Oh, yeah, the Fantastic Four. See, what is this? Superman's going to be a flop. It'll make money only in the first weekend. David Banner. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. You could be right. You could be wrong. Time will tell. And then El Santo, the Fantastic Four is coming out. I'm not feeling great about that movie, but I've said before, the stepson and the wife love the MCU. And I was surprised that the stepson, when we saw the trailer when we went to the movies a few weeks ago, that he said he wanted to go see it. So I'll end up seeing it, and I'm going to go in with low expectations and keep my mind open. But as a Fantastic Four fan and stuff, I keep telling myself it can't be as bad as the one from 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. And I'm totally willing to admit there may just be a few things I've got to let go. You know what I mean? With what they're doing. But Marvel has been off their game big time since Endgame. I mean, 2 or 3 solid movies that we've seen, and I'm not even holding them to the standard of the comic books. I'm holding them to the standard that they built up over 30 movies leading up to Endgame. And what happens? Deadpool and Wolverine kind of comes in there and shows them how it's done. You know what I mean? So they're capable. They're just tone deaf right now. Hey, what's up? Dr. Manchu is here. He loved it. Where's David Banner at here? All right, guys, I'm going fast as I can, man. You guys keep commenting, man. Superman was great. Glad you liked it. Uh, David Banner, that'll definitely cut into Superman's profits, and the movie isn't doing well overseas. I heard different. I'll have to look that up when we're off here. I heard it was doing, average, not great, but not definitely not bad. How's it? Metamorpho has a girlfriend. You got to read the comics, brother. You got to read the comics. That's yeah, yeah. He was Simon Stagg. Wait a minute. Simon Stagg is her dad. He was Rex Mason, and he was hired to go after the staff of Ra in Egypt for him, and things went bad. He was actually more of an Indiana Jones type, sort of, doing things just so that he could be with Sapphire. And Stagg wanted him to be with the freaking resurrected caveman that he has. So yeah, that's the whole thing, man. You got to read the comics, brother. Google is your friend. There we go. Dr. Manchu, I saw it at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and the theater was sold out. A super crowded theater with a diverse group of people, 40-year-old nerds like me, families, and the elderly. Yep. And then mine was also like that. We went on a 1 o'clock. It wasn't completely sold out, but it filled up at the last minute, which blew my mind. And then what was wild is about 10 minutes before the movie started, I went to the bathroom, just to prepare myself. No big deal. And then there was a guy in particular, and there was one or two other people, but this one guy was in such a rush to pee and get back to the theater. I thought he was going to hot dog me from behind. He came right in, went, whoa, and had to back up and go to another stall. And then he freaking ran back out. And the only reason he washed his damn hands is because I was sitting there drying mine looking at him, like, what's the deal, dude? And then when I went back to the theater, I saw him run into a seat. This was a grown man that was that excited about the movie. Fantastic Four is aimed at the same audience. That's David Banner. I'm not feeling the characters in Fantastic Four, especially the Fiend. That's JP Fawn. What do we got here? Is that it? I remember the Fantastic Four. I'll probably check it out. Yeah, and I'm going to end up checking it out. I was going to skip it, but like I said, the family wants to see it. I've already got a video up where I was like, I don't know, guys, when I saw the trailer and things, but whatever. So, you guys, we'll stop it right there. Jim Shooter to Superman. So, if you're watching in the future, guys, let me know what you think. Put it in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, thumb it up, guys. Thanks for everybody that popped in here. Yeah, we'll throw this out here by David Manner, and we'll end there. So, guys, make sure you read your comics. Make sure you do a little research on it. I loved the movie. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great start. And we have David Banner here. I'm stuck. I'm not on StreamYard, guys. I was going to make it pop up here. But anyway, says screening I went to, everyone had a mystified look on their faces and they came out of the theater. And then David Manchu says there's tons of haters and they were wanting to hate it before it even came out. And David Manner feels like the movie sucked. And then we have Dr. Manchu saying everybody in the theater loved it. I saw people that loved it. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. If you saw it, they got you money. It's too late. So, all right, guys. Everybody have a great day. If you're in the future, make sure you like, subscribe, share, let people know we're here. And then, hey, guys, just enjoy the rest of your weekend, man. Catch you on the flip side. Later.